All right, we're ranking the albums of the rah rah poker face lady. I honestly don't know how I feel about Joanne as an album. I definitely don't hate it. I definitely don't love it either. It's a very polarizing album to me. It's one that I haven't gone back to in literally years, probably since it came out. I listen to certain songs from it every now and again, but as far as listening to the album as a whole, I don't think I've listened to it as a whole literally since it came out. I remember when it first came out, I kind of forced myself to like it because it was Gaga, and Gaga is one of my favorite artists of all time. But it definitely is something of an enigma, no pun intended. Just looking back at the era and the album rollout, it was apparent that Gaga was going to do something different. It was far more stripped down than anything she'd previously done, both musically and aesthetically. This Gaga was far different from anything we'd ever seen, and especially coming right after Art Pop, again, it was very polarizing. Gone were the days of meat dresses and incubating in eggs or being vomited on stage. No, this was Gaga's Middle America housewife music era. And I don't mean any offense by that, but this just wasn't the Lady Gaga that I was introduced to and fell in love with. But hear me out, I am a fan. I am a fan who respects when an artist wants to grow, evolve, expand their horizons, and just, wants to do something different. Joanne is far from a bad album. I just resent the era a bit for what it did to Lady Gaga. It kind of softened her for the masses, which to me goes against what Gaga stood for in the beginning of her career. An example I point to is her 2017 Super Bowl performance. I have no issue with the performance itself, despite the fact that 2011 Lady Gaga and 2017 Lady Gaga would have given two completely different performances. But that aside, what bothered me about that performance was that so many conservatives came out and applauded of her giving a clean, family-friendly performance, free of politics, and a lot of this quote-unquote praise was a slight towards Beyonce, whose performance the prior year dredged up controversy and angered a lot of people for a lot of dumb reasons, in my opinion. What really bothered me was the fact that those same people who were praising Gaga's 2017 Super Bowl performance were the same ones who were boycotting her and calling for her music to be banned back in the Born This Way era. And I didn't like that at all. A Million Reasons was one of her best performing singles for a while at that time, and as weird as it sounds, I didn't like that. The song was just really blah to me. Gaga has so many other ballads that are so much more deserving of the success that Million Reasons got. Brown Eyes, Speechless, Hair, Gypsy, Dope. Nobody but Lady Gaga could have done any of those songs that I mentioned, but anybody could have done Million Reasons and it would have become a hit. To me, Joanne as an album and era represent the beginning of me losing touch with one of my favorite artists, and perhaps that's why I don't really look back on this album too fondly. I honestly look at Gaga's career as two halves at this point, before Joanne and after Joanne. But how I feel about the era has nothing to do with the quality of the music. It may be my least favorite Gaga record, but it's far from bad, like I said before. Ayo and John Wayne are two of my favorite Gaga songs, actually. I absolutely adore those. Perfect Illusion is her most underrated lead single by far. That song is spectacular. It gives me a rush when I hear it. I love it so much. Also, Hey Girl featuring Florence Welch is another one of my favorites from this record as well. That's about it as far as songs that I come back to from this album. Everything else just really didn't click with me, but I think I owe it a proper revisit soon. After the Joanne era and A Star Is Born, and when it became apparent that Gaga was finally returning to pure pop for the first time since 2013, I was excited. I hadn't given up on Gaga, I just kind of tuned out after Joanne, but I would be ready whenever she dropped her next proper release. Stupid Love dropped. I was less than thrilled with it, but hey, I wanted pop and beggars can't be choosers, I guess. And then when Rain on Me dropped, I, along with the rest of the world, forgot all about whatever Stupid Love was. Rain on Me was such a refreshing song, and the fact that two of my favorite artists of all time were coming together had me giddy, of course. And when Chromatica finally dropped, I was satisfied with the result. I knew it wouldn't be cracking my top 3 Gaga albums of all time or anything, nor do I revisit it as much as her other albums higher on this list, but I enjoy Chromatica nonetheless. Alice is great. The transition from Chromatica 2 to 911 is such a pleasure to listen to. I love that part of the album so much. Plastic Doll is another one of my favorites. Sour Candy is addictive. Enigma and Replay are good too, as well as Babylon. I will say that the Chromatica remix album did a lot to make me like the album even more, particularly the reworked versions of Alice and Stupid Love. Mind you, I really cannot stand the original version of Stupid Love, so for the remix to be my favorite off of Dawn of Chromatica is just really funny to me. Also, the Babylon House Labs version is better than the original in my opinion. Unfortunately, the pandemic pretty much axed the era before it had a chance to take off, which is a shame because Gaga had a whole concept for what Chromatica was supposed to be, but that probably won't ever see the light of day now. If anything though, Chromatica makes me excited for whatever Gaga has in store for her next album. I honestly didn't want to do my Gaga albums ranked video until after I did my art pop video, but my art pop video got pushed back because I wanted to do my Born This Way video first. But I'll give art pop its own video soon, but I'm going to give my thoughts concisely here and expand upon them more in the proper art pop video. Anyways, art pop is a great album. It has a lot of sentimental value to me personally. I don't care what anyone says. I will defend this album until the very end. I really can't describe it. Some of it is nostalgia, but art pop is quite simply misunderstood art. Chaos in the best way. The imperfections of this album actually benefited in my opinion. It was an album that was intentionally immature and disorganized and crazy. I'll go in more detail in the video. So many call this her flop era. You know, they were saying she was over. This era was truly a time to be a Gaga fan though, if you were around while it was going on. It was a fun time, to me at least. I look back on the absolute mess of an era with fondness because the era's messiness lends to the album's chaotic nature. The insanity of art pop was very much intentional. Like I said, Gaga went into this album and era with a very deliberate lack of maturity and responsibility, as she put it. It was supposed to give that crazed, drugged up, sex crazy rave vibe. Aura is probably in my top 10 Gaga songs of all time. I adore GUI. Sex Dreams is addictive. Manicure is fun. Do What You Want is great too. I just wish she would have never worked with that man who shall not be named right now. The title track is magical. Donatella and Fashion are underrated. Mary Jane Holland is a masterpiece. Gypsy should have been a top 10 single for Gaga. I could go on. It was the last era to me that truly felt like classic Lady Gaga. I remember when Aura leaked back when it was called Burqa and just being so astounded at the production and the rumors that it was the final act in the paparazzi telephone arc. I remember watching her iTunes Festival live and seeing her debut Sex Dreams, Manicure, Jewels and Drugs, and Swine for the first time and just shaking from sheer hype. I remember her opening the VMAs that year and being so hype about that because it was the first time I'd seen her on an award show stage in a while. It was like a proper comeback performance. I remember the Applause versus Roar War. I just have so much fondness for this era. I love it so much. I hold art pop very dearly to my heart. I really do. The top 3 of this ranking was actually really hard for me to rank because I love the next 3 albums so much and all 3 of them are very integral parts of Gaga's career, but ultimately I put The Fame at number 3. The Fame is a perfect pop album if I've ever seen one. You want to talk about an iconic and world-shaking debut album. Looking back at this record, it's actually insane that the first 4 songs on your debut album are all top 10 hits, 2 of which went number 1 and are to date 2 of the best-selling singles of all time. There's just something very special about The Fame. You knew exactly what kind of artist Lady Gaga was when you listened to it. Its sound is so distinctive, sounding nothing like anything else that was out at the time. It really is a work of art. I go into far more detail about it in my video about it and its counterpart. Be sure to check that out. What I love about The Fame is that despite being front-loaded with all the big singles, the quality doesn't dip after that. The deep cuts, while maybe not as memorable as the smash hits like Just Dance, Poker Face, and Paparazzi, still hold up beside the big singles. Basically, there's no filler here and no 2 songs sound alike, but yet somehow the album still feels cohesive. I love every song on here, but specifically the last 3 songs on the album hit really hard for me for some reason. Brown Eyes, I Like It Rough, and Summer Boy. I don't know why, but I've always loved these 3 tracks and associated them with one another. It's just a great ending to a phenomenal album. I may have already said this in my Born This Way video, which you should definitely check out if you haven't already, but Born This Way actually didn't resonate with me until very, very recently. I don't know why. I was fully tuned in for the Fame Monster era and the art pop era, but Born This Way kind of was a blur to me. I don't remember experiencing that era much. I guess I was occupied with other artists at the time. I don't know. But as time went on, and I revisited the album more and more, I started to realize just how great of an album it is. All the way up until once I completed my video on it, it hit me that this might be one of the greatest albums in music history. Very rarely do I say that. If I made this album ranking maybe 2 to 3 years ago, I actually think Born This Way would have been lower on the list, but thank God I came to my senses. Born This Way just checks all the boxes for me as an album. It has a message, it has a theme, it has a cohesive era, it has a timeless sound, it has a distinct sound, it was controversial, it was thought-provoking, it was inspiring, it pushed boundaries, it was unfiltered artistic expression, the list goes on and on. Born This Way is peak Lady Gaga in my opinion, the epitome of what I believe her to stand for, and that's why I refer to it as her magnum opus, something a lot of y'all disagree with in favor of another album of hers, which I also agree with. I believe an artist can have more than one magnum opus actually, for different reasons. Born This Way is just the album that I feel Gaga was born to make, and she even said this herself, I believe. That alone makes it her magnum opus to me. Yes, it's technically an EP, a re-release of The Fame, but as I've already stated before, artistically and thematically, this project is distinct enough and strong enough to stand on its own as a separate entity. The Fame Monster is an album to me. I don't care. It's a chapter in Gaga's discography and career, a very important one, mind you. I do consider this project to be her magnum opus as well. I credit The Fame Monster with making me fall in love with pop music. It was my pop music awakening. It was the album that really showed me what was out there beyond what my parents listened to. It introduced me to how pop music was more than the stereotypical mindless catchy tunes that the world saw it as. It showed me how pop music could be a form of expression, a form of art that could take many forms and sounds. It's hard to really put into words how I feel about this body of work. It's just so important to me and how I view pop music. The Fame introduced the world to Lady Gaga, but I think The Fame Monster really laid the foundation and set a precedent for what we would really get from her and just what kind of artist Lady Gaga is. The Fame was fun and accessible as an album for the masses, but it didn't sacrifice quality. The Fame Monster delved into territory and themes and sounds that didn't fit on The Fame, and quite frankly, Gaga didn't feel comfortable sharing with the world quite yet. A lot of the sounds and themes of The Fame Monster were a precursor to what we would ultimately get with Born This Way, and honestly art pop to a certain extent. Any conversation about some of the greatest bodies of work in pop music would be incomplete without mentioning The Fame Monster. And mind you, it's only 8 songs long. Sometimes I wish she would have thrown maybe a couple more songs on there, but honestly it's perfect as is. Every song on the record has its own identity, and not a single one is forgettable, and every song contributes to the bigger picture. Again, I go into far more detail about the record itself in the video I made on it, so yeah, go check that out if you haven't. But The Fame Monster is a masterpiece, plain and simple. Something that can and should be used as a blueprint for pop music for many decades to come.
Incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before, unafraid to reference or not reference, put it in a blender, on it, vomit on it, eat it, give birth to it.
If there's an artist whose discography you'd like for me to rank, then feel free to let me know down in the comments. My name's Wayne, and I'm just a boy who loves pop music. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing and sharing. Tell your friends. That lets me know you want more of this. Also, let's be friends. Check out my Twitter and Instagram. Links are in the description. Give me a follow. I'm not very active on them unless I'm uploading a video, but I'm trying to change that. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. I love you all.